small group. I hope you can hear me. If you can't, let me know. And move closer so you can see the images. I would like to begin, of course you know, since I'm on the program, that my name is Carl Ruck, Boston University. But I'd like to tell you that I'm joined here with three people who are perhaps more qualified than I am to talk about what I'm talking about. And so I'd like to introduce to you Peter Lamborn Wilson, who has written a book on Irish Soma, Following the Clouds for Soma, and Chuck Stein, a poet who has written about the Eleusinian Mysteries, Persephone Unveiled, and Mark Hoffman, who's been my colleague and co-author in many of the books that I've written and much of the work that I'm talking about tonight. So it's a small group. You can always interrupt me if you want to say something. We'll have plenty of time, I hope, at the end for discussion, and my three friends, I hope, will join in trying to answer your questions. So, I'm here.
Yay! Finally!
It's raining, it's muddy, but the chair is uncomfortable. I was going to talk about something else, but Olga said no. We have to talk about entheogens and the origins of religion.
Great.
And I said, okay.
Thank you.
And so that's the topic. And what I propose to show is that entheogens were at the beginning of religious experience. And I'm going to corroborate that by showing you that some of the newest formed religions similarly derive from psychoactive substances from altered consciousness. So I'm going to step on some toes. Many of you will know what I'm talking about. Some of you may be offended by what I'm talking about. We introduced the word entheogens in a book published in 1985, Persephone's Quest, Entheogens and the Origins of Religion. We weren't the first to suggest that, but it makes a statement. It says, it didn't say it was the only origin, but that psychoactive substances were at the beginning of religious consciousness. And in order to separate the prejudice that one has for altered consciousness, hallucinations, and things of that kind, we invented a new word, entheogen. It's accepted around the world, mostly, but there are also objections to it. In working with a scientist, he decided that entheogen was not a good word because it prejudged the situation, assuming that there was a religious dimension to breaking the barrier into other dimensions of reality. And so he came up with the simple term neurotropic, but entheogen is the word that we will be using. And as Gordon Wasson, you see Gordon there on the left and Jonathan Ott in the middle, wrote, "We are now rediscovering the secret, and we should treat the entheogens with the respect to which they were richly entitled as we undertake to explore their role in the early church of religions. We should call them by name unvulgarized by hippie abuse." Sorry, because many of you are hippies. and my colleague Gordon was an aristocrat. So we begin with the fact that our human ancestors have left a record of experiences engraved on the walls of caves. The earliest indications of that go back perhaps 35,000 years. Caves induce altered states of consciousness by sensory deprivation, perhaps intensified by the natural accumulation of toxic airs, and intensified by the ingestion, probably, of mind-altering substances or entheogens. And I have superimposed upon this image the kind of experience you might find in such a cave. You notice a very handsome man and a wolf. The man is turning into a wolf. And this is the very famous cave above the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi, the Wolf Cave. And most people are unaware of the fact that when you enter the cave, there's a rock formation before you get into the deeper recesses of the cave, which suggests a wolf. And when you're inside the cave and look out at the door, that's purely coincidental, but it's a mushroom. So, what is experienced in the cave? Experience is interpreted either as closer communication with the interior forces that dwell deep within the cave's recesses. And this cave has some 40 chambers that go deep into the mountain. It was sacred to the mother goddess. It was an entrance into the underworld. So you could go down in that cave, but you could also go in the other direction. Liberation out of the imprisonment, confinement into an opposite spiritual realm identified with the cosmos. Well, you're having a quick review, aren't you?
Yeah, good review. Quickie.
So, this release from the cave of ordinary seeing was probably the primordial origin of religion. I'm showing you here a drawing illustrating the famous cave of the nymphs from Homer's Odyssey. And I show you a prisoner being released from bondage in that cave. And the most enduring metaphor, the classic expression of this experience is Plato's myth of the cave, in which, as you probably all know, people are chained as prisoners, looking at the projection of shadows on the wall of the cave, which they take to be reality. And they're deluded, of course. You take them out of the cave, and you show them this beautiful muddy place that we are here, and say, no, this is reality. And once you think that's true, he says, no, this is the cave. And you notice someone has put a mushroom. You could pass through the walls of the cave, you say, and experience. Of course, you can't pass through the walls of the cave if you have a body, can you? But maybe consciousness is separable from the body. You can pass through the wall, and someone has put their, well, I'll show you a closer view of it. I didn't make it up. What gives you that kind of experience in the cave? As William James, over a century ago, said in his classic work on varieties of religious experience, only the filmiest of screens separates this reality from other equally valid versions of reality. You notice that the words are mirrored beneath it upside down. Just go, and go a little bit further, and you don't know that you were here because you're there. Most of you have seen the film of the Chauvet Cave, 35,000 before the Common Era, in southern France. Werner Herzog filmed it in 3D because he wanted to give the experience of hallucination as you pass through the cave looking at the images. I am told that in an interview he said that in addition to what else he found in the cave, they found the remains of mushrooms. I have a colleague who is a friend of Werner, and I asked him to corroborate this, since you always have to have more than one source if you're going to take it for true. And he said, well, Werner's traveling. I can't contact him now. And he hasn't contacted him. He won't contact him. Why? What's wrong with that piece of evidence? Why should it be excluded from the record? We have images of people perhaps wearing hats like mushrooms, or perhaps turning into mushrooms in rock art around the world. These come from Siberia. And many of you know this image from Tassili Nager of the shaman whose body is covered with mushrooms, but they can't be mushrooms, that'd be something else. But it's more complicated than that. He's turning into a bee, and he's got antlers, and there's a handprint on the wall. But it can't be that. Well, as a matter of fact, by chance, in 2011, I was a member of a team that investigated a rock painting in southern Spain, Selva Pascuala, a rock face overhang. And I mention it because most of you have probably assumed that probably what they were doing in the cave was not ordinary experience. We have the myth of transcendence from the cave in Plato's allegory and so forth. You probably think, everyone knew that probably rock art has something to do with altered consciousness. But this was the first publication in a peer-reviewed article which accepted the fact that this event is documented. So let me show you something about the cave. It's in a forested region. I'm walking there with one of my co-investigators. And the rock face has a natural configuration which suggests a bull emerging from the stone. And we have a very beautiful painting intensifying what was a hallucination out of the stone. I don't know how the rest of you ever realized there was something else that's reality that appears. But I remember as a child, in my bedroom, the wall was stucco. And perhaps I was a drug freak at 4, but I would look at the wall and I could see things coming out of the stucco. And this is what's happening here. But in addition to that, along the bottom, here we are in the rock shelter, we have 13 mushroom shapes. They are perhaps a psilocybe mushroom native that has a crooked stem. On the other hand, maybe the mushrooms are dancing and they're turning into people. The site is further interesting because that's only part of what's documented there. There's a hole through the mountain. It's towards the top of the mountain. On the other side, there are lifts that indicate the sun, and it is oriented, oh, blessed rain. And it's oriented so that at the solstice, the sun goes right through that tunnel. And in front of the rock face is a flat area suitable for mushrooms to be dancing.
Where does that, what's the date of that site?
It's Neolithic. It's about 6,000 before the Common Era. But of course, that's imaginary. But it's in southern Spain, near Catalonia, and the Catalonians are notorious for their love of mushrooms. So I'm going to move forward to present time. This is a guardhouse for a housing development designed by Antonin Gaudí. And weird, isn't it? It was never finished. It's been turned into a public park. It looks like a mushroom, but it couldn't be. The wealthy man who commissioned, it was going to be a real estate development, but people didn't buy the plots, and so it turned into a park. But he loved mushrooms, and from a paper at the time, he said he could grab is picking mushrooms. Everybody knew what it was, see it? But it couldn't be. Because it would be nasty. One of the masterpieces of modern art is, of course, Gaudi's Sagrada Familia Cathedral. And look at the beautiful decorations. And we know that Gaudi experimented with mushrooms as a boy. Catalonians love mushrooms. We know that he ate Amiga muscaria, and that he imitated in his art natural configurations. So, but it would be nasty to imitate a mushroom in a cathedral. As a matter of fact, he was a very saintly man. In the last years of his life, he lived in the cathedral, still under construction in the cathedral, and he had close friends with the ecclesiastical elite. There is a move to canonize him as a saint. The church has no trouble with it. You're the ones having trouble because you don't understand it. What are we dealing with? Why can't we talk about mushrooms? Some things shouldn't be said. They're too sacred to have a name. For example, the name of the one God in the three monotheistic religions. He has no name. You can call him Yahweh, because that's not his name. It's 4 consonants that you don't know how to pronounce. If you pronounced it correctly, it would be blasphemous. Why? Because you would control him. You must never, of course, if you want to control God, you can meditate on how to pronounce it. And if you should, by chance, happen upon the correct pronunciation, my God, you're God. The mushroom is in that category. We have no name for it. More people are arriving, but not enough chairs. Are there chairs elsewhere for them?
There's a pad here to sit on as well.
What's that? Yes. Okay. So you think we have a name for it, but we don't. We can call it fungus. That's safe because it's not English. It's Latin. And even in Latin, it was too sacred to have a name. That's not its name in Latin. It's a metaphor for it. It's the same word as spongos in Greek. It's a sponge because of the spongy nature of it, the way it absorbs moisture and as it fruits. You can call it a champignon. That's safe too because French comes from the field. You can use toadstool. That's not a name. That, of course, involves the whole folkloric motif of the stool of the toad sitting on it as a stool and so forth. In Greek, it can be a mykos, and you have it only in technical term mycology, the study of mushrooms. But in Greek, that's not its name. It means it's slimy and repulsive, covered with semen and menses. One word we do have is mushroom, and that's not its name. It's a very ancient metaphor too. It comes from, it's already in early French, the word for mushroom. It comes from late Latin and goes back to a Latin verb, musara, which goes back to the Greek word mu'ain, and means it's a moo. It's a zoomorphism. It's a bull or a cow. Of course, I'm making that up. But Greek poet can say, the field is bellowing with mushrooms. And the audience knew what it meant. not only is it a mushroom, but it is constantly in estrus, and it's in estrus because the cowfly is constantly stinging it. The word for the cowfly in Greek gives us our word estrus. So it's a whole mythological configuration, which certainly sounds like the common name for the Amanita muscaria, which is associated with the fly. So, that's safe. Now, I have given this argument to theologians, and they don't talk to me for a while, and then we end up being great friends again, but we never discuss this. And so maybe I'm wrong. Because if I'm wrong, I should be refuted. But one of the earliest indications we have of, we have very few authentic accounts of early Christianity. The Gospels were all written after the fact and are not written by the supposed evangelists. They're written by several sources and put together. They're not eyewitness accounts. They're not old. And one of the earliest authentic, but most people have accepted accounts of early Christianity is the letter that Paul wrote to the Corinthians, the first Corinthians. He had visited them 10 years earlier and visits them again, and he reprimands them. They are doing the Eucharist wrong. What does he say? It's right in the text. Because of this, quite a few people have taken sick, and quite a few have died. Now, he doesn't say died. He said passed away. But in the same letter, he used passed away the way we do for died. How do you die from eating a piece of bread? So we better talk about something else, because this will undermine too many things. It's highly unlikely that they died from eating too much holy bread and communion wine. I think we can all assume that. And so most of you think that the Eucharist, those Christian faiths that have a Eucharist, what a strange thing to do. Eat this, it's me, I'm God. And if you eat this, God will be with you. I didn't make that up. It's not my idea to eat God. But many religions do. And most of you assume that, of course, the Gospels set up the Eucharist as the basic ritual in the Catholic faith and some of the other Christian denominations. But it doesn't say that. At the Last Supper, Christ says, this is my body, eat it and in remembrance of me. He doesn't say eat it over and over and over in remembrance of me. It's one meal. And this is my blood. Drink it in remembrance of me. Now, first of all, a Jew would never say that. You cannot drink blood in Jewish religion. How repulsive. And so, what's going on? When in the 2nd century, the church came to write the history of the early church, of the Acts or Proxos of the Apostles. It says that the Christians, after the crucifixion, met daily and ate their food together. It's ordinary food. It's not the Eucharist. They ate together. It was a communal meal. It doesn't say that it was a ritual. It's how they existed. In the next century, the Christians were causing trouble because they refused to sacrifice to pagan gods. And so Pliny, as an emissary of the emperor, investigated a Christian cult in Anatolia And he said, no, Lord, it's just ordinary food. They're not eating their babies, and so forth, just ordinary food. They did, however, meet at dawn for some ritual that I didn't see. But no, their food's okay, nothing wrong with it. So what were they doing? Most of you know that the Christians were persecuted and hid in the catacombs in the persecution. And you think the Roman soldiers didn't know the Christians were down there? What a stupid thing to do! Get all together and have your ritual there? They were down there hiding from persecution. They were down there having some kind of secret ritual. What were they doing? Well, they leave wall paintings. This one says, agape miscenoted. That's correct spelling. That's incorrect Latin, but that's what we've done on the wall. Love mixed the drink for us. And you see that they're having some kind of last supper, apparently in the catacombs. This one says, Irene, give me a cup. Agape, mix it to me. Now, Irene and agape may be the first, the Greek name. On the other hand, they could be personifications of the experience. Agape means love, and Irene means peace. So we don't know if it's the dead person, but we do know that they're drinking in the catacomb. So let's go back to Paul. In this very same letter, he explains the Christian Eucharist. My argument is that there was no Christian Eucharist until Paul invented it. Paul invented Christianity. It was a version of Christianity that survived. But he says he's going to explain a mystery to them. He tells them, if you don't see in the Eucharist the body and blood of the Savior, you have destroyed it. What is he saying? He's saying what we're saying about an entheogen. You don't recognize that this incarnates the deity. If you're taking it just for recreation, to have fun, you've destroyed it. And he uses the word mystery. Mystery means something in antiquity. He's sent this letter to a congregation just 40 miles from the great mystery sanctuary of Eleusis. No one in the audience could take mystery without understanding it, at least in terms of that particular mystery, and of all the other mystery religions. Paul himself was a religious fanatic. He was a Philhellene. He knew Plato perfectly. He writes very good Greek. His family spent a lot of money to educate him in Hellenism. They were Jews. With his interest in religion, he would, of course, investigated the pagan cults. He was probably an initiate at Eleusis and the other mystery sites, too. And what does he say? Behold, I tell you a mystery. We all will be changed the moment in the blinking of an eye at the last trumpet blast. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be wakened uncorrupted, and we will be transformed. Then will the word written, that is to say, the scripture, be, death was drunk down. I didn't make that up. I didn't drink death down. Where death is your victory? Where death is your sting? Sting is the poison arrow, the prodding of the cowfly, and so on. So as for the Eleusinian sanctuary, we spend the whole evening on that, but we won't, because most of you already know the work that I did with Gordon Wasson and Albert Hoffman on this great mystery sanctuary. It lasted for 2,000 years, ending only with the conversion of the ancient world to Christianity in the 4th century. It has a huge cavernous hall. It's not a temple. It's got an ornamental front on it, but it's not a temple. It's a huge hall. The Acropolis rock has been cut away so that if it hadn't been cut away, it would be underground. It's a cave. It's a building built as a cave. It may, in fact, replace what was once a smaller cave because the rock is excavated. There's no way of knowing yet. In this groundbreaking work, 3 experts, a mycologist, a chemist, and a historian, argue persuasively, not to some people, that the sacred potion given to participants in the course of the ritual contains the psychoactive entheogen. So beyond the hidden, the sanctuary has high walls hiding what goes on inside it. Once you go through the outer portal and into the second one, can't go through all the evidence of what was experienced, but it was what I said, down or up in the cave. But the most authentic, unbiased, to say what happened was a capital offense. But Euripides in his Ion says that once you pass through the portal, you will see the stars and the moon dance. Hey, there's a roof on the building. You can't see the stars unless it's ordinary, not ordinary sight. Here in the center of the building, there was a lesser building, and the entrance to the temple building is where the mystery was pronounced. A great illumination suddenly happened. So what do people think? Oh, they had a big bonfire. Hey! No chimneys, no windows, hot, suffocating, big light. Oh, that's my great religious experience. How dense can you be? You still say, I'm illuminated, the Illuminati, I've learned something. We visited the work later because I continued investigating after the death of Gordon Wasson and shortly before the death of him. This book helps educate those who invalidate religious experiences that are generated by sacred plants, positively viewed. So look at this one. I find offense in even associating the gods of ancient Greece as the mere effect of a drug-induced trip. Never said it was that. I said we go through the interdimensional barrier. Where is that internet? It's right in this room here. You're so dense you don't see the people next to you. You don't realize that the solidness of this matter is all space. You don't know you can pass through walls. No, don't. I didn't make up the god Dionysus. He's the god of intoxicants. I didn't make him up. And as for whether this was the solar current, I mean, that's with other mystery religions, and recently there was a great mystery celebrated on the island of Samothrace, which had to do with the materialization of the fairy people, the little people. It's very beautiful, complex theology. The deities went by the name of the great gods, a mysterious group of luminous powers. You see one of the erection. Luminous powers who presided over religious ceremonies in the wilderness in the island of Samothrace and elsewhere. Termed a mystery because things happen that must never be divulged to outsiders. So, if Paul did make up the Eucharist, and remember, Jews do not drink blood, where did he get the idea? He was very interested in religion. He would have been If you're interested in religion, you go to this religion and that one, you experiment and so forth. He came from Tarsus, and Tarsus was one of the strongholds of Zoroastrian religion, Persian religion that was spreading into the Roman Empire. It was particularly popular with the Roman military. Only men were initiated. Most of the soldiers, most of the emperors eventually of Rome, and all the bureaucrats who administered the empire were initiated. Paul, of course, was poor. Although his family had enough money to educate him, and still held him with him. He wasn't poor at all. They were munitions corporation. Poor tent maker. Tent is for the army. Lots of money there. He was wealthy. And so they had close associations with the army. And probably Paul was initiated into Mithraism as well. Come back to this religion eventually, but there was a psychoactive influence. No, there wasn't. I'm afraid there was. It's right there on the table. This piece of bread, but it actually is full. It's coin from Tarsus and the full layer. And what was in this frame? It was a chamber about as big as this tent, underground, and men gathered there, no more than 30, and they went through a series of initiations, and they experienced a liberation to the cosmos through the roof of this cavern, sometimes ornamented with what you're going to see on the other side as a guide to make it through. So this is one version of the frame. If you went through the various stages of initiation, you reach the state the attack of Turkey, and that condition drawn probably a disembodied eye, but this is going to be used to kill the bull. You don't kill a bull that way. What? Powder. You don't kill a bull that way. It's a pruning hook. What do you use a pruning hook for? For plants. Good for picking mushrooms. Of course, I made that up. Here is the Greek faith. It survived in this place of tomb, where they sacred its meaning. It shows Perseus, who was interchangeable with that leather initiation of Mithraism. He was wearing that special cap, which is a fox cap, stylized, Phrygian cap, wolf cap. He's turning into a wolf. And he's picking, it's very much dependent to go over the news there. It looks like a mushroom that's just splintered. It's really an apple. You know, came up with her head there. It's ornamented with a mushroom. Now, that would be imaginary if I just said, well, it looks like a mushroom to me. But there is a literary account that says that he didn't cut off the head of the golden Medusa, he picked a mushroom. So let's cut that out of the historical record, because you can't make any sense of it. Here we see the banquet, and on the table you see that in the middle are Eucharist bread inside with the cross with the solar elliptic and the zodiac cross in the sky. So it has to do with making it to the solar realm. It's a close-up of it. It's very much like human will. My friend Mark here, and a friend in Spain, and I wrote a book about Mithraism, and we called it the drug cult that civilized Europe. We argued that the evidence indicates that there were series of initiations involving various psychoactive agents, and amongst them, perhaps the final one was a mushroom. But of course, it's impossible. But we found a Yazidi informant. We are marginalized in Muslim society. And he tells us from his personal remembrance that his aunt would perform the ceremony eating the mushroom. But he must be lying. And so maybe he's not. Maybe lurking in things that you don't think are mushrooms might actually be a mushroom. He's getting the shape of his hammer. Oh yeah, what about George head? What about it? And what about the double Anasina as well? We have various evidence, but this is the most compelling, I think. The religion assimilated other cults too. But here it's assimilated the Thracian cult of the great god Subasius, and it's very, very complicated. It's complicated because when you were undergoing the initiation, the meanings of the images were pointed out to you. Also, I want to mention that we focus on this one, and there is here the sun on one side, and here is wind, and here is mustard, and next to her is a fly. Yeah, it's not a bee. It's not a bee, it's a fly. So, back to Paul. As someone educated in Hellenism, he was also knowledgeable about Neoplatonism, which he references in this very same letter, 1 Corinthians. In his famous metaphor of the true reality, he is seen only as a reflection in a faulty mirror through a black darkness, pushed through the filmiest of barriers. He is blatantly a reference to Plato's allegory of the cave. As a Jew, he would also have been well aware of the conditions of the medical food that sustained the Israelites as they wandered for 40 years in the desert. You ate it and you saw God. It's only a metaphor. You ate it and you lived. No, you ate it and you saw God. You do something else to eat, like impossible, daily, even with food. But the Jews had nothing to do with psychoactive substances. Hey, most of you know now that in Exodus we have the exact recipe for making the holy anointing oil for the priesthood. It also says, if anyone uses this, who is not a priest, toss him out of the tribe. You can't use this profanely. And it includes, I don't know how to go back. It includes huge amounts of a substance which is translated as fragrant cane. One more. Oh, no, we have to go back. Look at all my supplies within one more. Yeah, this is one. Okay. It's called Kind of Awesome. Hebrew only has the consonant, you have to pronounce it. And for over 100 years now, it's been recognized by a linguist that is cannabis. And if you use this and you're not a priest, capital offense, you're exiled from the tribe. Does it work? I had a student who's the son of a rabbi, cannabis is now legal in Massachusetts. He made up a batch of it, anointed his head with it, and he said, "Professor, it works." So without any of the canonic scriptures yet in place, no sentence of God, so charismatic evangelism related with Hebrew heritage, the church was called largely with many versions of the agape, which is what the Christian meaning is called. You probably all know that this book by William Smith, theologian of Harvard, The Secret Gospel of Mark, discovered, found into another volume, a text of a letter from St. Clement of Alexandria, Bishop of Alexandria. And he's responding. Can you hear me?
We're getting a microphone.
I'm right here. I can hear you.
I have complications. The Lord doesn't want me to hear me.
Oh yeah.
Okay, let me continue. Eventually, you can hear me. He's responding to a young priest. Yeah. Am I making sense?
Yes.
He's responding to a letter sent by a young priest who's heard that there is a Christian sect that is using a secret gospel that he claims the church in Alexandria has in its possession. And they're using it to justify having a strange kind of Christian agape, love, faith, peace, which involved sex. But it was a Gnostic sex. And so sex is fine because it's fun. And orgasm is the experience that many Christian mystics use in order to explain what it feels like to contact with deity. Sex is good. Incarnation is bad because that puts spirit in flesh. And so they were using it to have sex without procreation. And of course, the church dominant did not like that for a bit. And so,
Yeah, I have no idea.
a remnant of this remains in the canonical gospel. At Gethsemane, when Christ was arrested, before he was arrested, there was a naked young man with him. Christ was initiating him into some secrets, and the naked young man ran away. But of course, Correggio did this only because he was gay and he liked to do things like that. But it has nothing to do with that. And so Clement says, yes, we do have that letter. He left his composition to the church in Alexandria, where even yet it was most carefully guarded. He read only to those who are being initiated into the great mystery. Oh, the church has secrets that ordinary people don't know? Clement is a saint. He said that. But look at what he says then. Nor should one conceive that the secret gospel is by Mark, but to even deny it on oath. If anyone asks you about it, lie. Say we don't have it. Why? Well, it's not really what you think. It's because you're not worthy to have the experience. You might take the Eucharist and die. You might abuse it. You might think it's fun. So, what was going on? From the 4th century, 300, there was an agape hall. And it survives because a basilica was built upon it, and repairing the bell tower of the basilica, they uncovered the original floor of the agape hall. And it shows an idea of the arrangement. Aquileia is just up the coast from Venice. Amongst other images, it shows a basket of muscaria, with snails. Oh, that's because the Romans loved mushrooms and they loved snails. This was not a restaurant. The famous fresco Plan Corot, that beginning of the past century was recognized by mycologists as representing the tree in Eden, Adam and Eve, and the tree was the muscaria. But of course, in the Renaissance art, they painted, and medieval art, they painted trees like mushrooms, stylized. And so it doesn't mean anything. Or does it mean something? You can trace who built the church and so forth, heretical sects coming from the Hollands and so forth, persecuted by the church against the Cathar sect. All of that is even a myth that we went into that shows that it's involved with the old tradition of the fairy goddess and the golden Medusa, all of that. But it can't be the Amanita Muscaria. But everything belongs in its context. And Wasson, in his last book, reversed himself finally. He was reluctant to see what we see. I once said that there was no mushroom in the Bible. I was wrong. It plays a hidden role that is hidden from us until now. And a major one in what is the best known episode in the Old Testament, the Garden of Eden story, and what happened to Adam and Eve. But everything belongs in context. On the opposite wall, the same chapel, we have another fresco. It illustrates the myth of Saint Eligius. He's the saint of the elect, the special initiates, an alchemist. The myth is that God showed up with his horse and wanted his horse to have, he was a blacksmith, shot. He wanted the horse shod, horseshoe on him. And Eligius found it hard to get